Today I'd like to give you some guidelines that will help you buy a mailing list. Now, in our direct marketing industry, there are three types of people involved with lists. You have a list owner, and that's the company that owns the list. You have a list manager, which is typically another company that manages and maintains the list. And then you have a list broker. A list broker sells lists, and they have access to all lists on the market. The list manager only will know about the lists they manage. So what I'm going to recommend is that you find yourself a list broker who has expertise in your field and in your marketplace. You can find these people in the standard rate and data resource I mentioned in the other video, or you can just go online and type in list broker. There are 15 questions that you will need to be asking a list broker when you're talking about a list. Now, they'll typically send you a thing called a data card, and I'll do another video going over how to read a data card. But the questions you want to ask the list broker, first off, is how big is the list? Now, if you're going to do a test of, say, 5,000 names, a list that has only got 10,000 people on it doesn't have much of a rollout. But a list that has 1 million people on it has a big rollout. If the 5,000 works, you can scale that up. So that's first thing. The second thing is the list related to your offer. If you are trying to sell something through direct response, you want to rent a list of people who have bought something similar in price point and similar kind of product to what you're selling. If you want to sell a new golf club to golfers, you want to find people who play golf and who have bought golf stuff by direct response before. There is also a term you're going to hear, RFM, which stands for Recency, Frequency, and Monetary Value. Recency means how recent was their last purchase, the people on this list. That's the recency. The frequency means how many times have they bought. Are they multi-buyers or did they just buy once? And monetary value is how much did they spend. All of these things are important, and those three things could be considered to be three of the most important questions you want to ask. You also want to know if the list is of buyers or inquirers. Now, it's not uncommon for the list company to say, oh, we have this big list of buyers, but really, most of them are only inquirers. Buyers are much better prospects than inquirers. Then you want to know where the list came from. How is it created? Is the list from people who purchased something? Or was this list compiled from people who want to win a sweepstakes or a contest? A big difference in how those names are going to respond. If they're freebie seekers, you're going to have a harder time selling them than if they were a list of real buyers. The next thing you want to know is what the sorts are. And by sorts, I mean, what are the criteria that you can select your list by? Geography or age or sex or, what are the choices that you have to pick from? And they will be typically on the data card. Now, another thing that you're never going to see on the data card is you want to know who's rented the list. What kind of companies have used this list? And most importantly, have they done what's called continued, which is a direct response term, meaning have they come back and rented the list again? Now, the list broker may not know if the list worked for the company or not, but it's a pretty good idea. If they've come back and rented more names a couple times, that's a pretty good hint it worked. Otherwise, they wouldn't do that. So you want to ask that question. If the list is a buyer's list, you want to know how people paid. Did they pay with a credit card, or did they buy something on a time payment where there are no payments due for the next 2 years? That makes a big difference as well. So you want to know how they bought. Another question is you want to know when the list was last cleaned. And by cleaned, we mean updated, because people move, they change addresses, and good lists are going to be updated, say, quarterly. If it's a compiled list, meaning it's not a response buyer's list, but a compiled list from public data, you're going to want to have them run it through the post office's change of address computer program, which will update all the addresses and catch the moves so you don't have returns. And lastly, what kind of format is available? Sometimes you'll get the list by email, sometimes it'll come on labels, many different types of formats. But depending on how you're going to use the list, you may want to get upper and lower case. The default is all caps, following the formula the post office likes. But if you're going to be sending a letter in the mail and you want it to look like a personal letter, all caps isn't going to cut it. You want upper and lower case like it would normally be. Now, there's one other thing you need to know. Some list brokers are not all that ethical, and if you ask for a random sample of a list, they will give you maybe hotline names or the most responsive names on the list. This is a problem if you don't know it, because maybe that little segment of the list is going to work great. You're going to come back, assuming the whole list is that way, mail 10 times more people the next time, and totally lose your butt. So you don't want that to happen. Now, a friend of mine came up with an ingenious way of making sure your names that you're renting to test are legit. And you can't tell looking at a random list. There'd be no way of knowing. So what he told me about is to check the frequency of the last name, the first digit of the last name. And I went through the Denver white pages and counted how many pages there were of names starting with each name. And I made a little chart. And what you do now, let's say the list has 10,000 names and you want to test 1,000 of them. Well, you go down on my little chart and you look for the letter that comes up 10% of the time. And then when you order your test list, you order the ones that start with that letter. Now you can just glance at the list and you can see it's right. And since with 26 letters, they vary in percent frequency from, 20-some% down to like less than 1%. So you can combine, maybe you want everybody whose last name starts with W and with T, because that gives you the proportion of the list that matches your sample size you want to test. I will also put that chart on my blog underneath this video. So hope you find this helpful.